I'll introduce you, and then you can. I mean, if there's a time frame where I think I could ask a question or something like that, I will. But for the most part, I like to kind of give you like a space to talk and to tell your story and things of that nature.
Okay.
I don't respond to the chats and all that other stuff because it's usually not that great. Just how the online stuff is, unfortunately. I mean, there is some good stuff to it, but it's very, there's a very big duality within like the type of comments you'll get. So, but how do you pronounce your last name?
Pittenger.
Pittenger.
Pittenger. I don't know. Like, am I saying it right? Pittenger.
Pittenger.
There you go. There you go. Yep.
So today I'm here with Joe Pittenger. Sorry, I'm not the best with the last names. He's actually a public speaker himself. You're also a executive of a nonprofit as well?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Yep. And today he's kind of here to share his story, talk about himself, and hopefully you guys can learn something from this as well. And yeah, so I'll let you.
Hey, right on. Thanks for having me. And if you're watching, glad that you're watching. So where to begin? There's so many different parts of a story, and you can look at it from different threads. So it's like what thread you kind of want to pick at. And so I'll start with this. We'll start at the beginning of the beginning because I think this is kind of cool. In 1854, I think it was, I just went to the spot, and the spot is this. I went to a spot where my family came over from Germany, and it was my 4 times great grandfather came over on a ship called the New Era, and he wanted to make a different, better life for himself. So he came over, and he was right off the coast of the U.S. They were aiming for New York, and the storm hit, and they because of the storm, just a couple hundred yards off the coast, 422 people started out on the ship, and only 163 made it. And so I just went to this spot, and I was like, this is so like surreal being at this spot and thinking if he didn't make it, then he wouldn't have obviously been here, but I wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. And, just those chances of him making it. And so it's so cool to kind of be at that spot right off the coast of New Jersey. Like I said, they're aiming for New York, but the storm caught him off. He ended up moving to Pennsylvania and then eventually settled in Ohio. And that's where my family took their roots here. A big part of my story, and definitely interrupt me at any point here if I'm just rambling on, a big part of my story, it kind of starts there because it's, he came over for religious reasons himself. Okay. He felt that he would have more religious freedom here in the States at the time, and he came over for those reasons. Now, in my opinion, he was pretty fundamental in his beliefs, and but regardless of that, religion was a big part of my family, and so my father. This guy came over, 4 times great grandfather. He was an elder of a church. Then my grandfather is a minister, my father is a minister. And so it's played a big part in my life. And to clarify, I guess my grandfather was on the other side of the family, but still, that strand of that thread has been a big part. And so I guess for me, my story begins because 2 people fell in love. Sometimes that happens, either lust or love. And my mother and father, they fell in love. We got married, and my father moved out to Kansas City to go to seminary. So I was born in Kansas City. Then I've lived all over, and eventually moved back here to Ohio. And there's so many things I could share. But I'll say this. I try to think what would be helpful for other people to hear. And so I don't know. I find like those parts of my story kind of cool, but I guess the parts that would be helpful, for me. So my father, he passed away when I was 12. And it's interesting, people, they'll go to the difficult. Sometimes when you ask about like, what's the meaningful parts of their story? And so obviously it stinks that my dad passed away. But, I mean, at this point in my life, it is what it is. Can't bring him back, but where's the good that I can find in that? What's the positives and the silver linings? And so after my father passed when I was 12, I eventually, some different things with my family weren't the best after that. And I lived with a couple different family members, lived with my grandma, some aunts, and then I eventually moved with aunt and uncle out to Kansas. And so, yeah, that was a difficult time, yet at the same time, it taught me so many things, like how to make friends easily, how to look at different people's needs. When you go through something yourself, you can maybe better understand someone else's needs. You can practice kindness and empathy. I ended up coming back to Ohio my freshman year of college. And when I did that, it was really, I'd kind of been on my own, but this is really being on my own. And it was good overall. One of the significant events that happened to me after my freshman year of college was I started working with a Salvation Army camp. And I bring that up to say that some of those past things, some of the struggles that I had felt, coming from a broken home, coming from some different issues, living with different families along the way. In fact, I lived with 5 families. And so went to 7 schools in 7 years. And so I just had a lot of turnover in my life. And my first year working at this camp, as right after my freshman year of college, so I think I was 19. I did not want to work there. It was such a difficult job. I mean, you would get up at whenever the first kid got up, 6:30 in the morning, whatever it was, and then you would be with the kids all day, and I just didn't want to be there. I thought, I remember looking at my car in the parking lot and thinking I could drive away right now, and nobody at this camp would ever see me again. They would just maybe talk about me for a few days, like, oh, I remember that one guy, and and then I could just go work whatever summer job, delivering pizza and just making money and play video games and whatever, hang out at night. But I just felt like there's something, a reason I needed to be there. I needed to be at that camp. I didn't know exactly what it was. And after my first week, the last night of my first week, I had taken the kids in my cabin, and they're about 11, 12 years old. And we just sat outside one night, like underneath the stars, looking at the stars and just having some really good conversation. And some more of them, started opening up about some of the different, struggles and things that they'd gone through. And, being a Salvation Army camp, that there is a lot of kids coming from some difficult backgrounds, a lot of, economic issues, as well as some broken homes and things of that nature. And, I'm not going to say I just felt like, I could help all their different issues and whatnot. But I remember that first night thinking, maybe there's something more here. Maybe there's something, instead of me just taking, that I could give back. I'm not going to get, as high of pay. I'm not going to have as much free time. But what else am I going to do in my time? Am I just going to sit at home and, play video games? And obviously, video games are fine and whatnot. But you get my point of like, what else am I going to do with my time? And I just thought, I think that I can provide something here. And so I remember that night, it's still like it was yesterday, putting my head on the pillow and thinking, this is where I need to be. So I end up going through that first summer, have an incredible summer. And I still recall leaving in my junky car driving away with all my possessions I'd taken to the camp that summer, and thinking that was fun. I never want to do that again. Now, I fulfilled what I said I was going to do, but never again. And I went back to school, and a couple weeks passed by, and I enjoyed school somewhat, I guess, but it felt like there was something missing, that I didn't have as much of that deeper meaning that I'd felt throughout that summer. And I thought, okay, well, what could I do? And so, the camp I'd worked at was Salvation Army camp. And I thought, what if I just go down to the local Salvation Army and see if there's any way I could volunteer and help out? So I went down, and immediately they said, yeah, we have a youth and family center. Why don't you, I was into exercise at that time. Well, I guess I still am, but more so at that time. And they said, why don't you just come and hang out in the weight room, and just be around some of the youth and be like a weight room attendant, And so I did that, and I eventually went into a role of like a youth mentor is what they call it. And I would just hang out at the place there, and, I'd come to meetings and that kind of stuff as well, but just being there for the youth. So I did that throughout the year. And then a couple months before summer, I started thinking, I think I should go back to this camp. And to make a long story short, I ended up working at that camp for 5 years. That youth and family center at the Salvation Army, I volunteered all throughout college. And then my senior year of college, they asked if I would take it over as the director. And, thought, really hard about it, but just felt overall, this is where I needed to be. And so I think my point of saying all of that is that those difficult things I went through earlier on in my life, if I could still have my dad here, I would obviously still have him here. If I didn't have to live with 5 different families, I would choose not for that to happen, But I can look back and I can see, not to get all sentimental, but even like right now in this room, like we can see like the sun up here and all that to say, like there's a certain beauty to it, and there's a certain beauty, I think, to the picture of where I took something that was difficult for me, and that's probably, well, I know it is, that's what gave it even more meaning, is that there's a concept called the wounded healer. And I'm trying to think of who came up with this concept. I have it on the tip of my tongue, but regardless, it was a psychologist who came up with this concept a long time ago. And it's basically this idea that we heal our wounds while we also help heal other people's wounds. That we're a wounded healer. And for me, and I still have some of those wounds from my childhood. I'm not saying that I could see the scars from them, maybe more so. And sometimes they can fester and they can open. And I know somewhat what it takes to kind of, work on them and to make sure that they're being treated. But one of the greatest ways I found is to be a wounded healer, or as it's called, logotherapy. And logotherapy is just basically when you find reason and meaning, and that comes from a psychologist named Viktor Frankl, who went through the Holocaust.
I read that book.
Yeah, yep. Man's Search for Meaning.
Yep.
And it's not going to negate and take away from the troubles and struggles that we have, but his quote in it, I'm definitely going to paraphrase, I'm not going to get it right. Basically, he says that man, meaning human, can endure if they can endure any if their how is big enough or something like that. But basically, if your meaning is big enough, you can
go through
exactly. And so that for me, I often felt that it gave more to me than what I gave to it. And the truth is I probably gave countless hours to it, but it gave back so much more to me, and it was one of the most fulfilling things. So if I'm talking too much, by the way, I can keep going.
You're good.
Yeah. So
It does
go ahead.
bring something up. So like Napoleon Hill, in the book that I'm reading right now, Laws of Success, he talks about like doing more than what you're paid for. And it always comes back to you. I mean, I'm not saying do it for that reason, but it's kind of like what you're saying right now about, you know, especially working there, volunteering. You're not really making anything when you're volunteering, but you were still getting, in the end of it, a lot more out of it.
Yeah.
And I also feel like with that, the people that have gone through the most messed up scenarios in life, they can have two choices. They can use it to destroy others, or they can use it to uplift and help other people, to relate to them. And I feel like it just depends on which way you go with it. I mean, clearly you went the way of trying to help people after everything you went through. I mean, that's something that I can relate to some degree. Like, I feel like that was the reason why I personally went through the stuff that I went through, was to be able to help other people who are in those types of situations. So, I mean, it can make you bitter and evil and hate the world, or it can make you the complete opposite, more understanding and wanting to help other people.
Yeah, I'd seen, you know, one of the talks, conversations that you had with someone else, and this person had said something along the lines of them going through something difficult, help them realize that, you know, any person at any time that you just see in whatever random situation, that they might be going through something. And that's why it's best to always have kindness. And this person that you had, you know, had a conversation with on your channel, was, they also talked about empathy. And I know for me, I think I could have still learned empathy for sure, but it definitely helped in that. Not that I know exactly, or I can feel exactly what every person is going through, but I can relate when someone talks about a pain. I can relate to that, you know, or a long-standing sorrow, or whatever it might be. I can relate in some way, even if it's just to the feeling. And so I think those feelings, you know, that we can have. Don't get me wrong, we can try to regulate feelings, and that has a certain benefit. At the same time, sometimes we need to feel what we feel and then to react from that. And those feelings that we can have, they can help us relate to others. So there can be good that comes from them, of course.
But I feel like, at least my personal point of view, is like, you can only have so much empathy for somebody. If they keep coming to you and talking about the same issue, it's almost like they're looking for validation. And it almost gets to a point where it's like, okay, I've already said everything I can say about the subject. Like, you now have to take what we're saying or whatever and like take action with it. Get yourself out of that same situation, because it gets to a point where I can be empathetic to people, but I'm also not going to have somebody coming to me about the same situation, like a relationship issue or something, 6, 7, 8 different times, and we're having that same conversation. It's like, you know, it doesn't work. Why are you still putting yourself in this position? Like, because we as people only have so much energy to give, and like, if you give too much empathy and too much energy to somebody, then on the same note, like, they're going to be draining you, especially if they're not really asking for advice, but more for validation for what they're doing. So like, it's always got to be like that.
That's
fine line.
And I think that's where a huge part of our, that's the question, I think, for our everyday life, is that we have this balance. And I think, you know, like, one of the technical names for it is like, you know, like ecological systems. And in that, you know, so for example, I have my inner self, and I need to take care of that. And then from there, you know, I have, you know, close relationships, you know, so my spouse, or close friendships. And some would say that family is like that next step. You know, I think, to me, it's like, who are you most, who are you closest to? But then from there, you have like, so you have your close friendships and family, you could kind of tie them together away. And then you have, let's say, your neighbors, your community, your society, or actually in between there would be like acquaintances. And then you have community, society, and just our larger world, you know? And so for example, like I could choose to not recycle this and that hurts my larger world, and I could be nice to the person next to me, and that's good, but I want to be congruent through all those systems as much as I can. I think where the difficulty lies sometimes is that we often feel that balance with someone who's next to us, or we can feel like if something is off, if it's in balance or not. And so a lot of times what can happen in our culture, and maybe I'll kind of pick up a little bit with my story with this, is that if it's good within our tribe, we can feel that it's good. And while that is obviously can be a good thing, it can also get us in trouble because, let's say, like you and I and a group of people, like we're really tight and things are good within us, but, we're a dick to everybody else, like that's not good for those larger circles. So I think it's always this balance in these different systems and trying to weigh that out. Now, I would say is that it has to start, man, even in saying this, okay, there are some who would say, like, you have to feel like a sense of overall belonging in the world. Like you have to start with that. Not that you have to feel that. It's good to feel that, but you have to start with that. And, maybe even like, for example, some people who are very religious, like they might say, you have to like first connect with the world, the universe, or God. And then it kind of comes down to, your neighbor, your community, and then yourself. And then even like that could be more of an Eastern thought in a way. It's more about the community, the collective, and then in our Western world, we can be very individualistic, and we'll say, well, it kind of has to start within yourself because, well, how could I, give water to someone else if my cup isn't full itself? This has been debated in philosophy and ideas for thousands of years, and I think it's a little bit of both. Two things can be true at once, but you have to be. You can take the good from both, but also you have to be careful of the bad. If you are hyper focused on the larger world, then you can forget about your own needs.
Yeah.
But if you're only focused on your own needs, then you can forget about like that larger. So.
Yeah. I guess I never thought about it like that. I've always believed more on the side of like you can't pour from empty cups. You should take care of yourself first. You can take care and lead others.
Yeah. So, and that's where if push comes to shove, that's where I start with. You have to first start with yourself. And the way that I kind of put it is you have to first start with yourself, but then you just don't end it there. You have to be congruent with all that is. And so I really get a lot from some ancient Greek philosophy and like Stoic philosophy. And Stoic philosophy, they would teach like you can only control what you can control. And so for me, and I'm kind of once again using the cup here, like this is me. This is what I can control. I can't control all the things that happen in this room or this world kind of thing. I can only control myself. And so I start there. But once again, going with like Stoic philosophy, so they would argue, or by argue, like they would philosophize that, make the case that you want to have an alignment with nature. You want to have alignment with all that is, and that might sound like something from thousands of years ago, but even in like somewhat more modern day, the psychologist Carl Rogers, he had what was called a big part of his philosophy of psychology would be congruence, and so it's like a congruence with yourself, but then like a congruence with like those systems around you. But a lot of people don't, if they don't feel that themselves, it's going to be much harder to connect to those. I've said a lot with that. I'll say one more thing. I've heard a quote before that's something like, if everybody can learn to clean their own porch, to sweep their own porch, then the whole world would be clean. Now, I want to be careful in saying that because obviously, like, we need to help each other clean their porches, but it is about taking care of yourself. Yes, we do need each other. Yes, we should take, help from others, but it's about, cleaning, taking care of yourself. And when we learn to do that, then it does make it better overall for everybody. But, all right, I've said a lot. So for real, like, interject at any time. I could kind of continue with my story a little bit.
Good. Like, this is the whole purpose of this. I'm going to check to make sure we're still in front.
Definitely. Oh, yeah. My bad.
No, you're good.
I'm a mover.
Can you come this way just a little bit? Yeah, that's better.
You think I was out frame before? Am I good? Or?
Slightly.
All right. It just has my foot in there.
When it does the short versions and stuff like that, it'll end up like there's the light fall. It'll be all in that, not actually in frame.
Yep, my bad. I should have. So I think, to go further with my story. So I worked in the Salvation Army, and I was a very devout Christian at the time myself, and that fit my world. That was, and to me, Christianity, Jesus taught that the two greatest teachings, or I should say, at least it's recorded that Jesus taught, to get technical, but that to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. And that was really what I aimed to do. And so I worked at the Salvation Army. Actually, the building I worked at was just right over here this way. Worked with, we had a rehab center that was, if I'm probably turned around, but I think it was right up that way. And so did work with them. And it was really about, for me, it was about, aiming to just to love God and to love my neighbor as myself. Even earlier talked about like how to, maybe I'm going down a rabbit trail, but how to, it's good to practice sympathy, but when is it too much? And I would always say to love them as you would yourself. And if you felt like, hey, would I want another chance or another opportunity or to be heard more? Okay. But if it's also at a point where it's, okay, like I've heard this person enough, so I say, put yourself in other people's shoes. But going back to kind of my story with that, it was that worked for me. It was really good for me. And at the time I was going to seminary and I was studying, a lot of religion, and I was being taught in, I would say, more of a certain specific and narrow way, that you have to understand things this way. I remember even in undergrad in religion classes, I remember a few times raising my hand and asking a question. For example, I remember one time saying, I pointed out some scripture and I said, what if Jesus wasn't perfect? There's a scripture, Luke chapter 2, that says that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, which to me would imply that at one point, maybe he wasn't as wise. And so I remember saying, in one of my religion classes, what if Jesus wasn't perfect? And people saying, what? You can't say that. And so I felt like I was always pressing the envelope, but my seminary kind of taught me this narrow path. And that's kind of the path I took for a number of years and became a ordained minister. I was supposed to be taking over for a church as their senior minister, as I was like associate minister, and then the senior minister was going to be retiring, and I was going to be taking over. In that process, I started to do something that has been really good for me, and I'll kind of get to. I made a transition. I'll kind of get to that here in a second. When I worked with the Salvation Army camp, so backing up a few years before I went to seminary and worked with the Salvation Army here in Toledo and other areas, I eventually became the athletic director at the camp. And every time we had somebody come through, or not somebody, but a group of students come through, I would, of course, have a sport, some athletic lesson for them, but I always would try to have some sort of teaching lesson. And it might just be a 30-second, like, oh, we're going to play dodgeball. Well, I'd sit them on the bleachers and say, hey, before we played this game, or maybe it's after we played, I'd say, hey, tell me about the game. Tell me what happened. I'd say, life is kind of like dodgeball. It can be a lot of fun, but there's boundaries. You step outside the boundary, it could maybe hurt you or your team. There's certain things you want to avoid, like don't do drugs, kids, like that kind of talk, like there's certain things you might want to avoid, or situations or certain types of relationships that can be harmful,
Mm-hmm.
and it was to kind of frame it in a way of like, this is overall, life can be incredible, but you have to be wise about how you played it. So I'd always have some sort of lesson with it. Well, the directors of the camp, the person who was our children's minister, who would get up and speak in front of our max, was 220 campers plus 80, 90 staff members, and the person who would get up and speak every morning to the camp and have some sort of teaching. They're going to be away. They had to go to a wedding for a week, and they said to me, well, why don't you fill in while they're gone? And I was like, oh, you sure? I don't know about public speaking. And they said, no, we've seen you just give even these little lessons. And we know that you can connect with the campers. And I thought about it, and I thought, okay, I'll give this a try. I ended up having an incredible week. When the children's minister came back, they actually had us both do it together. Not that I was stealing their job. I was more of assistant to them, And then the next year, I did eventually, when that person resigned, I eventually took over in that position. And so I really got into something that I love, public speaking. And it was some of the greatest training for me. To speak, to all ages of kids, and over 200 at once, to try to keep their attention. So I said a lot in this story here, but as I was saying, religion was a big part of it. Mm. I mentioned, my 4 times great grandfather. He came here to the States because of religion. It was a huge part of my family. I went to seminary. I was taught a certain specific way. And then I would go and speak at different places. And I was invited to speak at this conference in Denmark. And so I went to this conference, and I gave 10 teachings over the week, and morning and night, and for 5 days in a row. And while I was there at that conference, I would sometimes go into, a local town. Mm-hmm. There at the end of the conference, I went to Copenhagen. And so I'm speaking at this conference about how to live, the fullest life possible, the best life possible, but through a certain interpretation, not just by living for Jesus, but a certain interpretation of it. And I wasn't very fundamental myself, to be fair. But then when I was there in Denmark, I started thinking about this society that I was going and being a part of, going into town and seeing these different people, and thinking how they have one of the highest life satisfaction levels of any country, any culture, year after year. And I think it's the World Happiness Index, and other studies as well. And yet they're one of the most secular cultures. And so I thought...
What do you mean by secular?
By secular meaning either they aren't as religious, or they don't look at religion as much as in a fundamental lens as we do, or as many people in the States can. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of had that on my mind. And it started to create a little bit of cognitive dissonance. So I come back, and I was thinking a little bit about what happened there in Denmark, but overall, I'm still very committed to what I do and how I live and whatnot. And I think, okay, I'm going to take these 10 messages, these 10 talks that I gave, and I'm going to make a book out of them. Each talk will be a chapter of the book. I just have to take the audio from the video that was recorded of the conference and just kind of, this is before, AI was a big thing. So I was going to have to write it out myself and whatnot. And I start doing it, and I get done with chapter 1, and I just remember there in my office at my church, just kind of setting down my computer and thinking, what are you doing? And I was just I had this random thought. I thought, what if somebody like a Richard Dawkins, who is well-known atheist. What if someone like him read what you're reading? And not that he would agree with it, but would he say, listen here, young man, or whatever, you don't even know how to build an argument. You don't even know logic. You don't even know how to reason, So don't even try giving me these reasons of why your way is correct when you don't even know how to build a proper argument. And it just hit me in such a way, who am I? I get, on one hand, we can have imposter syndrome where it's who am I to do something? But we also have to have an accurate look at ourselves and have that humility of saying, before I go and I tell, especially someone to live their life in a specific way, and even though I probably wouldn't have said this myself at the time, that it could be implied that if you don't live this way, you're going to go to hell, who am I to say that? What reason do I have? And it really came from a place, we talked about empathy. It came from this place of wanting to love my neighbor as myself. And when going to Denmark forced me to do, it forced me to think, I talk about here's myself, here's my tribe, here's, my community, here's, my culture, my society, and here's the overall world. Mm-hmm. I think before that, I was forced to think about myself, the people intimately around me, and then my community a little bit. And my community oftentimes was, the camp or the Salvation Army or my church. And I would have some, I would go to, different city council meetings and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I had some interaction with my larger overall society. But what Denmark really forced me to do is to really think about people who are way different than me. Mm-hmm. And then when I came back, to think about someone who might see things in the opposite direction. And I had to put myself in their shoes. And for me to be congruent and loving to myself, I had to say, to truly love my neighbor as myself, I have to consider these things. Mm-hmm. I just can't care about my own tribe. That started a 2.5 year process where I went through everything I'd ever been taught. Remember, my father is a minister. I mean, I had been taught so many different things, and I knew the Bible in and out. As a youth, I was we did this thing called Bible quizzing, and I was the Bible quizzing champion of our district. Was 82 churches, and I was, I missed one question the entire year. I knew my family's book in and out. And so for me to kind of have to step back and take a look, I really had to go through everything that I ever knew in a way and really reason for myself. Is this what I actually think is true? And 2.5 year process. And I went through so many different things with it. I went through, for example, is scripture, is it a trusted source? I went through the morality of the Bible, things that are recorded of being that God said. I went through, what many Christians would say is the most important thing, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And for that, one, those other things. So the scripture, make a long story short, we don't have the original copies of scriptures. We have copies of copies of copies, There's been parts have been added in and taken away, and a good amount. There's more errors in the Bible than I think I've heard there's more errors in the Bible than there are verses in the Bible, but don't quote me on that one. I went through the morality of it, and I think that there's a lot of great morality, but there's also a lot of bad morality. And then one of the biggest things was just the belief of the death and resurrection of Jesus. And so for me, and I know that different people will, can land differently on this, but for me, if there is a God, for such a God to require a belief in something supernatural from 2,000 years ago, I mean, what if someone actually can't believe that? Like, is that wrong of them? Is it wrong of them just to say, I don't believe that? That's not wrong. They're being honest. They're telling the truth. They don't believe in something. So for someone to go to hell to that, for something like that is just erroneous to me. And then to go even further in depth with it is, if they're, okay, in our United States, and obviously our justice system is not perfect, but at the same time, we might have one of the best justice systems the world has ever known, and as flawed as it is. But I guess my point is, even the most perfect justice system anywhere, we have a statute of limitations. Like we can't take a case, I think the only, the thing that we don't is for murder. Yeah. And even with that, I don't think that we've ever had any murder that we have found guilty over 100 years past it happening. I think the record is close to 70 years or something like that. But I guess my point of that is that to have to look back 2,000 years and try to make a decision if you believe something or not, and not just something, but something that's supernatural, and the supernatural, you can't test it. And so that right there, to me, when I started thinking in that way, I thought, I don't think that I can believe this. Now, I started going through on an intellectual level. I did not believe in a fundamental version of Christianity anymore. But there's still this emotional level. There's the relational level. Everybody else I know, kind of believes in that way. And so on an emotional level, I thought, okay, God, I don't intellectually believe this. And not saying that, I didn't really say I don't think that there's a God, but I don't think that it's Christianity. And that's more of my approach now. I'm more agnostic, but, I have a deep wondering if there's a God, and yeah. But during that time, so I remember praying and just saying, all right, God, if you're there, let me know, let me know that it's Christianity kind of thing, and at that time, the song that was popular was "Say Something." I forget exactly how it goes, but it's say something, I'm giving up on you. Anywhere I would have followed you, and it repeats say something, I'm giving up on you. And I remember listening to that and just crying out. And I knew that I needed to leave being a minister. I needed to. I think I took a look in the mirror one day and I said, Joe, let's be honest. You don't believe this anymore. And there, shortly after, I had a friend come visit, and he was a friend who had come out to me years earlier as gay. And we were sitting in my driveway, and I think that I felt comfortable saying to him, I never told anybody that I didn't think that I was a Christian anymore, at least in a fundamental sense. But yet I felt comfortable telling him, and I think because on some wavelength he could relate to in a way of what it's like to hold on to a secret. Not saying they're the same thing, but to hold on to a secret, and then to when he came out to me, to be able to share that. He knew what that was like, and so I shared it with him, and it was very freeing for me. But then as soon as it left my lips and I shared it with him, I felt I've admitted that to myself and to someone else. Now what do I do with that? Because I can't stay as a minister. I don't think that would be right for me. It wouldn't be good for my mental health, and it wouldn't be good for my congregation. And so it took me a couple months. I decided I could have left sooner, but I decided not to leave my church right at the Christmas time, because that's a huge holiday for them. But when I made a New Year's resolution, I said by the end of January I want to resign, and so that's what I did. It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. For me, it was walking away from a career that I loved. I didn't know what I was going to do next, and but completely worth it. And I could tell more where that's kind of taken me from here now, because it definitely influences a lot of my work. But I've been talking a lot, so.
I mean, I do think that the Bible has good things in it that people can learn from, that can apply to their everyday life. But I don't believe that we need people telling us how to make our own decisions and perceptions of the teachings of the book. I feel like, especially the King James Version, I know that was really made by King James back in the day, and that was made for the peasants, and it was made for people to basically be sheep and to follow a certain thing. I believe there are good teachings in it. I honestly believe that, and this is the other thing that always tripped me up, was the fact that Christianity didn't exist until after Christ. But when Jesus was here preaching, he was not preaching a religion. He was preaching just one of the light to bring people together. And I believe that is why he was crucified, is because he was a threat to the powers that be at the time. And I don't know, with that, I believe this might sound crazy, but the way that he was healing the sick and walking on water,
it's not crazy at all.
Well,
no, go ahead. Yeah.
I believe he was trying to teach other people how to do that, to tap into a deeper strength within ourselves. And so we could do the same thing that he was doing. We all have that same ability that he had. And I believe that was another reason why he was a threat to the powers, a major threat. And that's why they did what they did. And then they used him as a martyr and made a religion out of it, and then changed all the stuff. In my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. I would say a lot of that I agree with. Some of it I'm just not sure. But so some of the things I definitely agree with is that we have to remember, I think a lot of times, religious people today, if they realize that how much their religion is affected by their local culture, and even some of the stuff of today, to me, I say, I felt a lot of times it comes out of this, a 1950s version of Christianity. And so the world of that time, we had just finished World War II. The U.S., it was, thought that, communism was the devil kind of thing. And that's when we added, I think it's 1953, we added, In God We Trust, to the Pledge of Allegiance or to the dollar. And then 1957, and I might have the dates wrong, but both of them were in the 50s, was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. One nation under God was added. And so we start adding these things because communism is literally the devil kind of thing. And we're a Christian nation, even though we're not, because of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and further things that stated elsewhere. The Treaty of Tripoli and different stuff made it clear we're not a Christian nation. But a lot of it was in response to some of these things happening on a larger level. And so a lot of people today, and take Christian nationalism, how much that is a part of some of these beliefs. But going back further, so I talked about where the vacuum that Christianity can exist in today. When you look back at it historically, a couple things. One is this whole idea of Jesus being a Messiah. Well, a couple things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that the Old Testament doesn't say that there will be the Messiah. The Old Testament says it's plural, messiahs. There's actually messiahs in the Old Testament, one of them being King Cyrus. And it's this idea that there can be people just as today we can look back and we can say Martin Luther King, although not perfect, he made society and transformed our world. He was a Messiah. He was a bearer of good news. He brought light into the world. Gandhi, although not perfect, he stood up to oppression, to government oppression, and so we can look at these people and they are messiahs, and so at the time there's lots of people. The time of Jesus, there's lots of people who were claiming to be messiahs, and there's lots of claims. So supernatural healings and stuff were a very big part of things then, and I mean, I could get way more in depth with that. I have different viewpoints on it, but all of this to say, these teachings that Jesus has, a lot of them were influenced by Greek culture. So a lot of times people think, oh yeah, like the New Testament just follows the Old Testament, so it just comes from that. Well, the teachings of Jesus have a lot of commonality to do with with the Greek culture. So for example, Jesus, what is said to be like one of his bread and butter sermons, he starts out by saying, it's called the Sermon on the Mount. It's a lot of scholars think that he gave it in multiple places, but he starts out saying, blessed, and that's a very like Greek idea. Blessed are you when you hunger and thirst for righteousness, for you will be filled. I mean, that's a Greek idea of virtue ethics, and then also. The world at that time, you have the Greek influence, and right there happening in the Middle East, you have the Greek influence, and then you also have the Eastern influence. So a lot of these Eastern traditions, Buddhism and Hinduism, and just a lot of the Eastern traditions. So a lot of Jesus' teachings actually are very similar to a lot of those Buddhist and Eastern teachings. So. I've said a lot with that. I'll say this. So to me, sometimes I'll have people say, man, how do I best say this? All right, I'll go back to maybe some original ideas of around Jesus. A lot of times today, people are taught you need to say a prayer that Jesus will enter your heart. Where the hell is that in the Bible? It's not there. Or you have to believe that Jesus physically rose to the dead. Okay, well, is that what all of the earliest followers of Jesus believed? And they didn't. At that time, it was debated that was it a physical resurrection or a spiritual resurrection, like when we die, And so for people to say, yeah, like I believe Jesus rose into heaven. Well, yeah. Because I also believe my grandma rose into heaven, and my dad, and my friend who passed away. And when I die, I will go back to this earth or to this universe, to heaven or whatever it might be. And I could go deeper than that, but I don't need to. So this idea of Christianity being believing in a certain way and whatnot. At the time of Jesus, they called it the way, and where have we heard this idea of the way before? And so in the religion, Eastern tradition of Taoism, or Taoism, pronounced both ways, it's what's called the way. And it's this idea of there's a certain path that we can follow. And it's kind of like, be like water, be like the stream, don't fight back on life, too much. The way will make its path, be gentle, be peaceful. In Buddhism, we have the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a path. It's the way, And so I think that Jesus was heavily influenced, and I could go more in depth with some different theories on that, but I won't. There are some theories of this Eastern influence, but all that to say is there's this way that people can follow. And at the time, not all Christians thought that it was, you believe in this prayer, and you have to believe that, that Jesus physically rose from the dead. but this whole idea, you said it's interesting that the religion of Christianity wasn't really invented until after Jesus. So my background, my undergrad was in sociology, but a lot of like sociology of religion. And I did a lot of study of sociology of early Christianity. And the way that this idea of Christianity came to be, it was people. Matthew chapter 25 states that I was hungry and you fed me, I was naked and you clothed me, I was in prison, you came to visit me, you know. And it says to look after people in that way is to like look after Christ in such a way. And Jesus says in that, he says at the beginning of that teaching, he says, here's how I will separate the good from the bad, the goats from the sheep, you know. Not that goats are bad, but that's how he put it, you know. Basically, you know, here's who makes it into heaven or not, if you even want to use that language, which I've got thoughts on that. But and he says, he doesn't say you have to believe a certain thing, you have to, you have to say a certain prayer, believe I physically rose from the dead. He says you have to basically take care of people, you know. So that Matthew, it's been a while since I studied, but I believe it was written, I want to say, in the city of Antioch. I do know that time the city of Antioch is actually when the first Christians were called Christian. I want to say it's Acts chapter 11, but they were first called Christians there. And it was somewhat of a derogatory term. Not always, but it was, hey, you're like that Christ guy, so you are a Christian, you're a Christian. And what they were doing, though, there's a lot of record of the city of Antioch had a lot of, difficult things going on in it. And they, a lot of people, a lot of orphans, a lot of widows. I could go into the city dynamics, but basically they had a lot of major catastrophic events. And there is a group of people who are practicing belonging and giving food and shelter and taking care of people. And that's what grew Christianity a crazy amount. And then later on, it did get, in my opinion, perverted by Constantine and, when it became more official religion, official Roman Empire religion, and brought forth in today. So I've said a lot of things. Any thoughts you have? And if you need me to shut up at any point, tell me to. So
You're good. Well, I didn't know any of that. It's actually very interesting, for one. But I've also heard that the Catholic Church actually has like the rest of the Bible too. So we don't even get the full version. There's like I forgot what they said it was, what those books are called, but they're locked up in Rome, in the Vatican. And you have to go there to physically see these.
Yeah. So the Catholic Church, so they have what is available to anybody, and so they do have extra books in their version of the Bible. Now there are, I shouldn't say this as like I absolutely know. It has been very, like you're saying, it's been very, it's been, a lot of people do think that they have a lot more records on things. The Catholic Church has been big in, astrology and so many different areas. And so there is a lot, in the Vatican, there's a lot of belief that they have a lot of records of different things that they've never made public. And I think that could be, I think maybe at this point now, I could see where maybe they have like a lot of like previous history, but I don't think that anymore that they would be like on the cutting edge of anything scientific. In fact, the Catholic Church throughout the centuries has elevated science in some ways, but also very much, they've killed people for having scientific viewpoints, Galileo Galilei, for having scientific viewpoints for saying that the earth is round instead of flat like the Bible says, So, but yeah, that is interesting, like some of the different things that they might potentially have.
I didn't know that's where that theory came from, about the world being flat. I didn't know that was in the Bible. or like?
Yeah. So and to be fair with it, there are some points in the Bible where, I mean, you mentioned Shakespeare. I find it interesting. You mentioned the King James. Yeah. King James was edited by Shakespeare. I want to say it's in Psalm 119 I think it's something where like Shakespeare is like 47 at the time, and he puts in the word shake in like, I think it's Psalm 119. It's one of the Psalms. And then 47 words later, he puts the word spear. So he inserted his own name in the Bible, you know? So if anybody wants to say, oh, the Bible is the perfect word of God, and I mean, I could give way more examples that even go way back further than Shakespeare, but so there is some things where it does talk about, you know, says like the spear, but there's also a lot of references, the four corners of the earth. And a lot of these different references, and I mean, even going back further, the old viewpoint of the Bible and the Old Testament, and what many thought, is that this is earth. You know, this table here, this is earth, and below us is hell, and above us is heaven, and they would call it the firmament. And
sorry.
Oh, you're right. So it's this firmament, and so out of the heavens, which is where God lives, it will rain, as it talks about like the flood. He opened up, the firmament, the heavens, and it flooded. When Jesus ascends, and this was their viewpoint then, well, Jesus says he went into heaven. Well, here's the problem. In our modern day world, we've been there. Like we've been, I mean, I guess we've been to the moon. We've taken, pictures. We've sent, spacecrafts, billions of miles away. We don't see this heaven. And so from like that traditional biblical stance, like, did Jesus just float through space for years until he reached, and when he returns, like as some Christians think, like, will we see someone like floating by Mars and then the moon? But I don't know how I got all that, but
I never thought of it like that, though.
How about this? I've said a lot, but why don't I kind of take kind of like part of my story and just kind of close up where it's brought me to now? Is that good?
Yeah.
Excellent. So one of the things I started talking about is just, like these ideas, like beginning early on in my life. And, whoever's listening to this, you go through different things. Of course, we all do. And what good can come from it? It's not to negate the bad, but is there any silver linings? Is there any good? I mean, even out of some of the most terrible things, I think of Viktor Frankl going through the Holocaust. Obviously, the Holocaust is terrible and wouldn't wish that, of course, on anybody. But what good could he take? And so for me, I think about like some of these things, my experiences as a child, as a youth, and so trying to help people. My years working with the Salvation Army and trying to help people in difficult situations, where I feel like I was able to maybe help in some different and maybe some better ways, and to relate. And then my experience of, having to question everything I ever kind of felt about the way I was brought up in religion, and how it meant, losing my career, how it meant losing, different relationships and things of that nature, and identity, which is a huge part of it. So I guess to kind of catch up to speed, since I left, since I resigned as a minister, I mean, it's been, I started to have to make money in some ways. And so, I gotten to, have a couple rentals. And so don't want to come across as I'm some, rental slumlord or anything. I have a couple rentals that are nice and I think are good for others. And so some of the good is it's kind of helped me with some long-term financial growth, and that's been helpful. As far as meaning and purpose, I started working with an organization called the Clergy Project. And so helping, it's an organization that helped me when I left as a minister. They're an organization that helps ministers who are going through such a transition. And so they helped me. And Then, after about a year of being a part of the organization, they asked me to be on the board. And then they asked me to actually be the one who, when ministers they'll preach on Sunday, and then on Monday, they say, I don't know about this, and I need help, and I need someone to talk to me maybe about how I could, transition, career-wise and just family and all those different dynamics. So I coach ministers going through that transition. And just be clear, I'm not trying to convince them to leave the religion or look at religion differently. By the time they come to us, they've already done that. That's not my job. But my job is to say, okay, this is where you're at. Like, how can we land this plane? How can we help you lead ministry in a way that's actually good for your church, that leaves them in a good place, but is also good for you and your family and your loved ones, and help them kind of reinvent their life. So,
didn't know that existed.
Yeah.
I don't want to put it that way. I mean, but if there's a market for it, then there must be a lot of people that have gone through the transition you've gone through.
Yeah. And I say ministers. It's more than just ministers. We have people from all different faiths, but right now we're right under. I just spoke at a place about it, and we're at. I was looking at the stats beforehand. 1,375 members. So nearly 1,400, and some of them might be, faith leaders still currently. We don't try to say, oh, you need to leave by this certain point. I will say, from my perspective, I try to say, hey, like, either let's help you leave as quickly as we can, or maybe there's a way, like, for some, for example, let's say, they're 1 year away from retirement and they have, let's say, a special needs daughter and they rely on their insurance. What's the ethical best thing to do? And so maybe there's a way where they can talk more about, let's say, in Christianity, some of the ethical neighborly teachings of Jesus, like love your neighbor as yourself, or look after the least of these, so where they can kind of feel maybe more congruent to their own viewpoints and also to the church, and kind of help that transition as they go into retirement, if it's, in a fair amount of time. So, so we help them with that. And then another big thing that I do, since leaving, I have felt both the positive and the negative impact of community. We need community. I mean, right now, we have a loneliness epidemic. Our Surgeon General, years ago, I think under the Obama administration, declared it's a national health emergency. Just as smoking or other things can be emergency. Loneliness is an epidemic, and we have a great deal of loneliness. And right now, on a religious landscape, we have more people who are considered nuns, not Catholic nuns, but don't hold to a certain religious viewpoint, as well as look at religion. They still might be like religious but spiritual, but look at it in a different way. All that to say, I don't think that our traditional church is working anymore. To some it is, and to some it is in some dangerous ways, like Christian nationalism. But I don't think it's for everybody. And so it's been my goal to create community where all can belong. That's a huge part. And not just belong, but where people can come and talk about the things that matter the most in life. Because we don't have those places and spaces. We might even have a Frisbee golf team that we're a part of. But are we going to get together always? It might happen. Maybe we have a beer afterwards and we talk about more of those things. But to have a place where we can, come together and talk specifically and intentionally about the things that matter most, I'm passionate about that. And so I lead an organization. I'm the executive director of an organization where we come together. We have three major tenets. Our first one is that we're grounded in life together, that we're all part of this human experience, and what I do affects you and what you do affects me. That we're all part of this experience. We have a shared humanity. And the second thing that's probably the most important, that we want to be guided by love. More than anything, we want to be guided by love. And we would even say, even more important than what we do or do not believe. Oftentimes I'll say to people, so you believe in God? Great. Is that making you a more loving person? If not, then that's not good. And I'll say to people, so you don't believe in God? I don't care. Like, are you being honest? Are you being loving? Are you being kind? Like, that's the most important thing. And so to be guided by love is the most important thing. But then our third concept that we have is to grow in wisdom. A lot of people say, oh, I want to live a loving life. But what does that mean? I mean, we hear about it in songs and media and culture, but what does that mean? And so good philosophy to me, good philosophy helps people love themselves and love others greater. That's the best kind of philosophy. It's practical. It helps our lives become better. And so we, once a week, we have a larger gathering once a week, and then we have different groups that meet throughout the week. But we come together to grow in wisdom and community so that we can aim to love ourselves, this cup, as well as our larger world in even greater ways. And so I lead one of these communities, but it's my goal. If I'm being a little ambitious, I get it, but I would love to start these communities all over. It's one of my big goals in life. So
that would be good. It would be good for a lot of people too. People that don't know really where to go, especially after leaving a place like that, or just growing up with a super religious family, but they know it's not for them. I mean, I think that'd be very beneficial for people, and to show people you don't necessarily have to be religious to be a loving person. Like, I mean, I guess in some instances they can go hand in hand depending on what you read from the Bible and how you interpret it, of course. But some people think that, like, if you don't believe in that, then you have no, like, moral compass, and that you're like this anarchist crazy dude or something like that. And, like, that's not the truth. You don't need those things to know how to be morally right, in my opinion.
Yep. I completely agree. Yeah.
I believe a lot of us, it's like a natural instinct. I mean, there's your one-off people, and like there is with anything. I mean, like Ted Bundy or something, like, people that have a different psychological makeup. But for the most part, I believe as people that we know what is morally right, what is morally wrong, with or without a religion. Like, it's ingrained in our humans, in our societies.
Yes, so I completely agree. And I've had that argument before where people say, the official name of the argument is the divine command theory. And divine command theory states that because there is something, divine that tells us what is good and what is not, then like that's where we get morality from. And we need that, because if I didn't have, something, out there, maybe with a threat of heaven or hell, well, I might just go on a killing spree, and I've heard it said, someone that I know has said before, I kill as many people as I want. Oh, because some people say, like, oh, you can do just whatever you want. And I say, yes, you can. You can do whatever you want. And I've heard someone say before, I kill as many people as I want. I rape as many people as I want. I steal as much as I want. And the answer to how much I want is 0. Because I realize that doesn't lead to a better life. I realize I don't get me wrong, like the Bible or any religious text, it can be helpful. I look at this, well, I won't go down that rabbit trail, but I think it can be helpful, but do I need it? I don't need it. In fact, the Bible kind of tells that itself. Paul makes an argument that he'll say, like, the law of God, there's like this general revelation that's kind of written on our hearts and we just know. And then there's like specific revelation which comes through the Bible. Now, do I think it's like written on our hearts? No, I don't. Maybe not. I wouldn't use that language, but because what might be acceptable in one culture might be different than another. However, I don't think that we need. In fact, my life wouldn't be. I really probably wouldn't live if I absolutely knew that there was a God, versus if I didn't. I thought that there's absolutely no way. I don't think the way that I would live my life would really be much different, So
I also believe it's more of a fear-mongering type of thing, a control fear-mongering.
oh, absolutely.
That's what it's used for, to keep people in line to follow, and to not be able to be independent of your own thoughts, feelings, emotions, and to have to follow this certain way in order to have a good afterlife. And I don't know, I just feel like it's a very controlling thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, I think about, the Bible has been used for so much good and so much bad. And a lot of it's been in the name of control and power. We think about our modern day politics and right now, come on, is Trump really a Christian? We know he's not, but has he used the religious right? Absolutely. Why? For his own ego, for his own power, and his own control. And it's sad to me to see so many people, I think it was, 73 or 76 million people in our last election, be okay with that and be okay with being used. And now, in my opinion, I think the guy is a maniac and off the rails and is the furthest thing from a humble leader that we need. So it's definitely been used. The Bible's been used against slavery. It's been used for slavery. There's a lot of verses that are very pro-slavery in the Bible, and even Paul. I think about this. To those who want to say that Jesus is absolutely perfect, I don't think Jesus is absolutely perfect. Does it take away from a lot of his incredible teachings? No, it doesn't. In fact, to me, it makes Jesus even way more relatable, because he was, I think, a human just as I was, that he had struggles. And to think that he was perfect, if he was perfect, he had all this stuff written about him, and he yet couldn't find a way to say, hey, humans, at any point, in any time, for any reason, don't own another human. And he never said that. And so, and those, there might be those who said, well, maybe he said it, but it just wasn't written down. Well, if he was perfect, he would have found a way for it to get written down. Paul says, slaves, be obedient to your masters. So the Bible's been used, for so many different types of things. It's helped intellectualism, and it's also been against it. For me, it's helped. One of the main teachings of the Bible and Jesus is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Because I took that main teaching so seriously, it's been the greatest reason of growth for me as my intellectual self. But I also have to be fair and look at it and see how it's been used. Well, the Bible says it's flat earth, and they've killed people, burning them at the stake. I could go through so many different things, but it's definitely been used for sure for power and control.
I believe that's why on the money it's written, in God we trust, and why that's pushed so much here in America. Just, I guess it's another deep rabbit hole, but even with that, I don't believe they're talking about what people would imagine would be God. I believe they're talking about something a lot eviler, a different type of God per se, in my opinion.
Oh no, you're right on with that. So there's a fallacy in logic that's called equivalency fallacy. And so, for example, you could say God, I could say God, we could have a room full of 100 people, and we would probably get 100 different interpretations of what that God is.
Yep.
And so just because someone says God doesn't mean that's the same God of someone else. And I do think that there is, if someone says they're Christian, I'll say, okay, well, what type of Christian? It's not just Christianity, it's Christianities. There's so many different Christianities. In fact, I've heard that there's more different types of Christianities than there are verses in the Bible, and I could even go through, even off the top of my head, I could go through so many different types. But I guess going back to that political thing, it's definitely been used for power. We look back at our history, even the history of Christianity, and in the 3rd century, Constantine declared Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. Whether Constantine was a Christian himself was very debated. I mean, he claimed that, I do believe. But come on, it was a 60 million person empire. And I think at that point, 33 million of the people claimed Christianity, of 60 million people. So for him to say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian too, do you support me? Well, yeah, you're much more likely. And what do we see right now? Our country is predominantly Christian. Mm-hmm. And for someone to say, I love the Bible and I love Christians and I'm a Christian and I got saved, Donald Trump, mm-hmm. and this right wing, and this has happened for years. I mean, I look back, I do believe that George Bush was legit a Christian. But when we look back, did he act always in Christian ways? I mean, he caused so much destruction in the Middle East for oil and money and power. And this is the same thing, the same playbook that Donald Trump is taking. And I guess all that is, what do we mean by Christian? And to me,
there's also 800,000 different types of religions.
There's. And
they're all claiming to be the one and the only truth.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I don't know the exact number of religions, but there's so many different claims of gods and whatnot, and a lot of them, especially in the Abrahamic religions, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is going to have a lot more claims of this is the one. Now, I want to be fair that there are progressive strands of those religions, of all those religions. And they're not always, so take, for example, maybe the one like I'm more familiar with, like would either be like secular Judaism or progressive Christianity. And so take like progressive Christianity, like a common phrase is, there are many paths up the mountain. There are many ways to God. And this is just one way. Another way I like to put it is maybe there's like the truth of the universe and it's like a painting on the wall. Mm-hmm. And let's say in progressive Christianity, we are just one light. We are not necessarily the beautiful painting itself, but we are one light that shines light on the beautiful painting. All we have here is an ugly outlet. And there's other religions. So like Buddhism, Taoism, a lot of the Eastern traditions. Like, for example, in Buddhism, as well as Taoism, you don't have to have a belief in a God. I mean, you can, but you do not have to in their religion. So, and there's many that do, but it's not a necessity. So
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to. I had something on my mind that completely slipped.
You're all good. Well, hey, we've covered a lot of ground. I hope I did not go on for too long. Obviously, I get passionate about these subjects, but I guess anybody who's watched all the way through the end, I think maybe there's like a thread that runs through all this, and maybe it's a good ending place is, whether you're religious or not, do good. Love yourself, love others, and if you are religious, be careful to not put your religion above doing good. There's a Bible verse that says, hold on to what is good and do away with what is not. And so, take the parts from your scripture, from your tradition that are good, if you want, and hold on to those. But the things that aren't, for example, if your tradition is against homosexuality, or if it's teaching that people go to hell because they don't have a certain belief, are those things that are loving? And I'd say that they're not. And I think I could take a deep dive, but even Jesus went against the things of his tradition. He went against the Bible itself, the Old Testament. He said so many times, you've heard it said, and he quoted Old Testament scripture. And then he said, I tell you the truth. That's not the way it is. It's a different way. And for someone to be Christ-like, it's to go against the system. It's to go against the tradition It's to go against, oppression and all those things. And our religious systems, a lot of them today can be oppressive. And so if someone wants to truly be Christ-like, you have to be willing to be courageous and to do what's right, to go against those things. But all that to say, there's a scripture that says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. I think that's the case. I think that's true. You have your greatest chance of being filled. It's not an automatic. Personally, we talked about ethics and where do you get your sense of morality. I take a viewpoint of what's called virtue ethics. And virtue ethics, basically, it states like if you aim to be virtuous, it gives you the highest chance of a satisfying life. And doesn't mean it's a guarantee. It doesn't mean that you can't have mental health struggles and different things, but it gives you the greatest chance, because even by being virtuous, you aim to love yourself and love others and to take care of those, mental health issues and those different things. So aim to do good and it'll work out. That's my viewpoint. So thanks for having me share. Appreciate it.
Before we wrap it up, if the famous question, if you were to give one piece of advice to somebody, I guess you kind of already did this, but I guess another piece of advice to somebody,
yeah,
what would you say? Like if you could only say one thing that could really help anybody from any demographic?
Yeah, I would say to live as loving of a life as you can. And I know that sounds generic. So I'll be, hopefully this summer I'll be done. Well, hopefully it'll be done sooner than that, but I'll be releasing a book here, hopefully this summer, and I'm going to be speaking at some different conferences and stuff on this subject. But basically, how do you live as loving of a life as you can? So to that, I would say, if I could give any advice, to live as loving of a life as you can, and to take that seriously. And to take it seriously means to aim to figure out how to do that. And so what I use is goal setting theory. And goal setting theory says first you have to get clarity. And so get clear. What does it mean to live as loving of a life as you can? Without going in depth, because I have some different tools of doing that, look for my book at a certain point, but get clear on it. Whatever tools you need to use, get clear. The second thing in goal setting theory is to do something challenging. If I say my goal today is to drink 1 cup of water, that's boring. That's unmotivating. Maybe I'll do it, But if I say, hey, I want to drink 8 cups of water and I want to run 3 miles and take, 15,000 steps, there's actually something motivating about that. And I can, provide receipts on the research that shows bigger challenges are more motivating. So don't be afraid to be bold in how you need to love and show up in this world. So get clear on what it is, but make it something challenging. And for me, that's why I want to start communities that are focused on helping people live a more loving, wise life. That's why I want to write a book. That's why I like speaking at different places. It's challenging. It's good for me. The third thing is be committed to it. And the fourth is consistent. I do feel if you can get the first 2 done, you're much more likely to be committed and consistent. The book that I'm releasing has like a daily journal part of it to help people stay committed and consistent. But overall, aim to live as loving of a life as you can, but be smart about it. Do it with wisdom. So that'd be my probably biggest advice I can give.
I like that. We talked about it a little bit. I think it was the first time I met you, but I feel like that's something that anybody and everybody could use and should be trying to do with their lives. Trying to push themselves a little bit more outside the comfort zone, have a goal that they're excited about, and work towards that, take action and do it. So absolutely.
And it's it's an exercise, and it does start kind of, I keep pointing to the cup, but with yourself, and it's it helps your life satisfaction as well as others. And hey, who doesn't want that, I guess. So
yeah. Well, thank you.
Appreciate it.
But
it's all good. So
yeah, I appreciate you for sitting down and talking with me a little bit, and for sharing your perspective on things with everybody else as well. These all get posted as well, so it's live, but then it gets posted.
Okay.
it'll be something that's on the internet that people can come back to and
Yeah,
see.
nice. So I was gonna say, since it's live, I guess it doesn't matter now. But dude, if I talk too much or anything, man, like if you like, I'm not gonna use this. You won't offend me or anything. Use it how you need. But I guess I should have asked beforehand. Like, like how much do you want me to talk? Do you want to, or should I just go and you interrupt as needed? So hopefully I just didn't ramble on too much.
No,
so.
I mean, I just go with the flow with it. There's no real set way of doing it. I mean, if feels like a time that I can say something, I do. If not, for the most part, I try to listen. Like the last one I did before you, it was an author. His name's Jason Weber. He's written a few books. He's actually working on his 4th right now. I talked a lot more. Like he would talk a little bit, then he would stop, and like it just depends on the person. I've had people like yourself who talk. Like I mean, if you saw Hannah's, she did most of the talking there. It really depends on the person. Same thing with Ethan.
Yeah, like podcasts and stuff. I never know exactly, and it just kind of it's been different. It depends on I've had where it's just been, hey, like just share what you want. I try to kind of look at the length of some of your other stuff because I was like, well, if he's only hoping for 20 minutes, well, then I don't want to go as in further depth, So
I usually do them as long as it goes. I mean, we only had this space till 6:30, but no one's came and said anything. So it's all right.
Shoot. Yeah. Yep. So for real, use it as you need. If you're like, man, this guy rambled on too long, you don't have to. So.
I'll be able to clip a lot of stuff from this too. I believe that you have a lot of good information that could be shared. So like what I'll do is I have a program. It's called Opus Clip. I can take the long form and it'll cut me out the parts that it thinks are like the best and like best talking points or like information.
Wait, what's the program called?
Opus Clip.
Opus Clip. Okay, nice. Yeah. I want to start doing some more stuff in this space myself, but I don't really know much about it. So yeah,
highly recommend that, especially for longer form stuff like this. I can take the YouTube link once this is posted, put it into Opus Clip, and then it'll clip as much as like you can change it. Like you can prompt it, be like, hey, I want it to be, inspirational, viral talking points. And then you can pick the length and you can do all that. And then it just literally takes a video, cuts everything, edits everything, and puts it all together for you just like that.
Awesome. No, that's cool. I will check that out. So, well, hey, for real. Thanks for having me. Thanks for like hearing people's stories and it's cool. So it's good stuff. You gonna be at Convos anytime this week?
I'm actually going after here, play pool, and
hey, there you go.
Finish my editing stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I'm trying to do a lot of writing this week. So I've gotten a good amount done. I'm actually in the editing stage more so now. Pretty much have it all written, but
almost there.
Yeah, man, it's kind of it's kind of nice in a way. Like I'll speak at the community I lead. I speak every other week. And so for like this book I'm writing, like I've just spoken, and then I'll have the next week off from speaking, and I'll kind of put it in like book form, and then I kind of have like the next week to do the next chapter. So it's been good for that. I'm actually going to be speaking on this book and the subject matter at a local church here coming up in a week here, so we can have. But yeah, I'll probably be at Kava maybe 1 or 2 nights, so I'll probably see you there. But.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I do a lot of work there usually at night myself.
Yeah. It's I like going to other coffee shops and whatnot. Like, there's nothing open. Like
not that late.
Yeah, and it's like I could go to a bar, and I've done it before. And if anybody says, I've had people say before, "Why do you bring your laptop?" And I'll say, "Because I want to work on stuff. It doesn't matter to you." But I don't know. There's something about Kava that's different vibes. So.
But I'm gonna go ahead and end this then. So go ahead, if you haven't already, go ahead, like, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified every time I go live, and share this with a friend.
Heck yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for your time, man. I'll see you around, all right?
You still have the mic.
Oh, shoot.